The next question is from Nick Perry.
Thank you. How can Hackney meet the demand for affordable homes, in the widest meaning of that, without repeating the mistakes of the 50s and 60s, where we built low-quality tower blocks that didn't last, and instead now create homes for mixed communities that will still be desirable in decades to come?
Okay, so this is in large part about the quality of the new homes that we're building, isn't it? It's about the, So, Robbie.
I feel like I've answered this question 3 times already, but what I'll just kind of plug briefly is in the Chatsworth Road area of Clapton, we're developing a neighbourhood plan, and it's all about trying to make a positive case for housing and making sure that it works for the community as well. So one of the things that we're drawing into the planning laws for our local area is high quality design, balconies or outside space in every unit, kind of certain square meterages and sustainability of units, so that we're doing as much as we can to make sure that it's housing that people will welcome in the area, but also it's going to be sustainable for the long term as well.
Okay. Tunde, just to pick up on one particular element of the question, this thing about tower blocks. Tower blocks get quite a bad press. Do you think that's necessarily fair?
Again, it's something that Robbie addressed earlier. I don't think it's tower blocks per se, but it's the design and the sustainability of the tower blocks. Okay. And I think that's the main issue.
Okay.
So when they're improved, I anticipate the criticism will disappear as well.
Okay. Cheryl, got any thoughts about the sorts of housing, the sorts of quality of and style of housing that is best for people?
I think the style should be mixed as far as you can, given all the constraints, because people like different things. I think try not to compromise on the quality too much, because you're just loading up problems for the future. How you do that with limited budgets, try and get investment in, all those sorts of things, but a really tough challenge, I'd say.
Just this thing about mix is very interesting, because everybody sort of automatically agrees that mixed communities are a good idea, but I overheard, or was actually sort of part of, a conversation with, let's say, someone working in the public sector on a reception desk a couple of weeks ago. She was talking about where she lives, and she lived in what sounds like a sort of mixed tenure, recent development here in Hackney. And she was most disparaging about the proximity of people in social housing. She wasn't very keen on them being within sight of her view at all. And this was not a highly paid, terribly posh, grand kind of individual we're talking about here. Any thoughts on that?
Quick question before you open it to the floor. Was her concern about the people that lived in the housing or the housing itself? Because then it goes back to the point
I think it
about
might have been,
architecture.
it might have, just from her sort of body language, the way she wrinkled her nose, I think it might have been the people.
Fair enough.
But I may be doing her an injustice.
Just to pick up on that, I mean, this is an issue, and I go back to the question of affordability, I think, more than design. But, we're seeing this now, spiky architecture, this idea of putting in barriers to people rough sleeping, for example. The growing tensions where there are mixed housing. So, for example, a project that we're working on at the moment in East Village in Stratford, because of tensions between social housing and private renters. And mostly it's around things that you could actually work with the residents to overcome. Noise and kids playing are usually 2 of the key issues. But we're seeing, again, linking what's happening in London to the international housing market and property market. Housing properties being advertised to potential buyers in Asia without social housing, like marketing them as this is all private, it's got no social housing. So this is where we do need to make a stand, I think, both nationally with our government and also at local level, saying this is something we shouldn't be allowing to happen. We shouldn't be turning our housing into safe deposit box for international capital and allowing these kind of segregation to happen.
Okay, Jules, this question about making mistakes with the pressure to build more and more stuff, is there a danger that we're going to build rubbish that people don't really want, and maybe in 20 or 30 years' time we're going to be knocking it down again, or people just aren't going to be very happy there? Is there a danger of that?
I think certainly a lot that exacerbated it in the 60s was the speed that it was built. And actually, that's the dilemma that London is in, actually. If we built at the rate that was needed, and the practically a million homes that we probably need to build by 2020 just to get back on top of the deficit that London needs, a lot of them would be dreadful quality, because the industry just would not be able to build at that rate and deliver good architecture and well, I don't want to say designed communities, because that sounds a bit creepy, but certainly having put designed space, both private space and public space, that is conducive to good neighbourliness and people getting on, as Melissa touched on, well together. But that said, large developments can work, and come back to Woodbury Down, which I think, when people start needling away at trying to look for problems, they find it. But that is something, 2,000 homes that hardly anybody wanted to live in. They were built in the 30s. They were threatened with a listing because they were one of the first social blocks, or the first social block in the country to have a lift. But that was no reason to list it. They were dreadful. Whereas actually Berkeley Homes, I hate to say it, have done a fantastic job. I say I hate to say it because, I'm not in the game. I've got no interest in praising the private house building operation. But they have facilitated transforming 2,000 terrible homes into what will be, by the time it's finished, a £1 billion makeover, 5,500 homes, 40% of which will be social and intermediate homes. And so, and as I say, we come back to the question, the quality, it is fantastic quality, but not all of the volume house builders, but a long way, achieve the kind of standards and take the kind of care that has been taken by that developer.
Okay, thanks. Now I'm going to go back to Nick.
Thank you. You don't build a town without building a school and a GP surgery first. And it seems increasingly now we're increasing density, particularly on land plots that are already well developed. We're relying on the private sector in particular to develop at a density which isn't sustainable, because we're not hard enough on them at delivering either money for or directly those other amenities. So we'll get places that will stand up for 100 years, but will people really want to live in those places in 20 years? And I think that's the dilemma.
Fantastic. Now, I'm going to move straight on to the last question, because we have 4 minutes left.